Hi, welcome everyone. Today on Wednesday, January 20th, 2021, we are kicking off our first webcast episode with Ketch. It is a developer-friendly approach to deploying faster on Kubernetes. I am joined by Bruno Andrade. Welcome, Bruno.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course, I'll kick it off.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me today. And as mentioned, the goal today is to talk a little bit more about Catch and give a little bit of a background of what Catch is about and how it can help as part of your delivery process. And the reason why, if we step back a little bit before and we think about why Catch was created, Catch was created by and it is maintained today mostly by Shipa. And the reason why we decided to open source Catch and invest the resources on building and open sourcing Catch as a platform is because if you look at the way application delivery has been structured today when it comes to Kubernetes, you have your application developer, you have your Git source code, maybe GitLab or GitHub, for example. You have your CI pipeline, which most of the organizations today, they have multiple CI pipelines in place. And now your developers, they are tasked with delivering the applications into your different Kubernetes clusters, because that's also a reality that we're seeing where most organizations, as they start getting more comfortable with Kubernetes, the number of clusters are growing. And what we see and what we learn is that when you're delivering the first set of services, the first few applications, it is okay. I mean, your developers, they need to go and learn how to create deployment sets, Helm charts, and so on. But for the first few applications, we would say it's definitely manageable to do these deployments and the integrations and incorporate the process of generating your charts and so on into a CI pipeline, so applications can be delivered across your Kubernetes clusters. But as you move from that kind of day one into a year later or months later, what is happening is that your developers are really getting dragged into the infrastructure level, where managing and delivering a whole lot of services across multiple clusters creates a lot of complexities, where they have to really learn what Helm charts are, deployment sets, and are what type of ingress rules, how do you manage CNAMEs and others, and how do you incorporate into your CI/CD pipeline across clusters. And we've seen that has been a big issue, and many times when it comes to the enterprises being impacting the velocity of adopting Kubernetes and a structured CI/CD pipeline. And that's why we decided to take that component that helps the developer to actually deliver the applications and focus on the application code away from Shipa, and open source that component and call the project Catch. And and the way we structure that is, and the way we structure and think about it is Catch as an application management framework. And how that works is you have your regular scenario where you have, well, as mentioned before, you have your developers, your Git, you have your CI pipeline, and it may be different CI pipelines across different tools, and you need to deliver that application to Kubernetes. Now, what is different than the scenarios before, Catch allows you to create what we call pools. And these pools, they are mapped directly into your namespace. They are directly mapped to your namespace in your clusters. And what happens is, instead of now the developers having to create the Helm charts, deployment sets, ingress rules, and so on to have their applications deployed and synchronize that with their CI pipeline, you can actually create these pools and connect your CI pipeline directly to these pools. By doing so, that removes the complexity of creating the Helm charts, creating deployment sets, having your developers focus on the kind of infrastructure related components and objects that Kubernetes requires. But now focuses the developer, or shift the focus from the developer to the application code, where support to canary, application logs, focusing on the application. These are all part of the application management framework. So, and enough of slides. If we jump into a quick demo of Catch, I think you can all see probably my screen, and I hope it is large enough. what we have is I have Ketch installed into a Kubernetes cluster on GKE. And even though I'm using GKE as the cluster, Ketch is not tied to GKE specifically, but you can also run Ketch on AKS, on premises, EKS. We are seeing folks actually posting about K3S and others as well with Ketch. But just for the sake of this example, I'm going to be using GKE. I have a cluster on GKE called Ketch, and I installed Ketch already in that cluster by basically following the documentation that we have on learn.theketch.io. And if you follow the documentation on the Getting Started section, this will teach you how to create or how to install your Ketch CLI in your local environment. So you can have that up and running and available here in your terminal. And for Ketch to give you the some of the functionalities, such as creating CNAMEs and certificates automatically and attaching to it and so on, and supporting the different ingress controllers, you can install Cert Manager, and it will work, for example, across traffic and Istio, as well as cluster issuer in your ingress. That will help Ketch support the your ingress controllers, and as well as some of the functionalities, again, such as CNAME, adding CNAME, certificates, and others. Today, Ketch works with both Istio and traffic. Down the roadmap, which we're going to cover a little bit later, Ketch is also expanding into other ingress controllers that you may have, but these are the two that that Ketch started with. Once I install these, the last step that I followed was basically to install the Ketch controller. The Ketch controller will create the CRDs and will make Ketch available in your cluster. That's it. The whole install process actually takes you basically just a few minutes, no more than 3 minutes to get it up and running. So I'll run through two examples. One is me as a developer. I'm going to create a pool using Ketch. I'm going to create an application, and I'm going to deploy my application using my terminal. And the second example I'm going to show is embedding Ketch into your CI pipeline and replacing a lot of the Helm charts and object configuration that you would need to do if you were using just the regular kind of attaching Helm chart, creating the Helm charts and attaching it to your CI pipeline. I'm going to be following the example that here for our first application on deploying from my terminal. The first step that I'm going to do is, if we recall back the presentation, is we point our CI pipelines to the pools, right? So the first step for me is to create the pool, and I can easily do that with Ketch pool add. I'll call it dev, for example, and then I'll point the ingress service endpoint. This is actually required, so when Ketch deploys the applications for you automatically, it also creates an endpoint for your application, and it leverages your ingress controller. So in my case, the endpoint for my ingress is 194.198.5.218, which you can get that directly from your cluster, or if you're using, for example, like me, GKE, you can see it actually presented here. So it's easy for you to actually have access to it. And I'm going to say my ingress type is Istio. So as mentioned before, you can be using both traffic and Istio today. Great, it's successfully added. So if I just do Ketch pool list, for example, I'm going to see my dev pool here, which again, Ketch maps a pool directly to your namespace. So if I do kubectl get namespace, I'm going to see a namespace called Ketch/dev that we just created. So our dev pool that we're going to use on Ketch, it's actually directly mapped to this Ketch dev. The next step for me is to create an application. So I would say Ketch app create. I'll create a bulletin board application, which is a very simple. And I'm going to point to the pool where I want this application to be deployed to. So dev in this case. If I do Ketch app list, I can see bulletin board is already here, and it created an endpoint for my application. The thing is, there are 0 units because we haven't deployed anything yet. So the next step for me is to do a catch app deploy. I'll do a bulletin board, and I'll pass the image for my Docker file. That's it. So what Ketch is going to do is Ketch is going to download the image, and Ketch is going to create the objects that are required in your cluster to run that image. So me as a developer, I don't need to be concerned about what type of objects, what type of deployment sets I need to be running in order to run my, my bulletin board application. If we're doing a catch app list, we're going to see that now the bulletin board is here. In a few seconds, the application will be running, and we have the application available directly here. Let's see if it's up already. Okay, and the application is running. So me as a developer, I don't have to deal with a lot of the complexities that Kubernetes brings to my application delivery, but I'm focused more on the application code delivery itself. The other point, so that's me as a developer deploying directly from my CLI. But we understand that a lot of deployments that are driven from a CLI are not driven from a CLI perspective, but are rather driven from our CI pipelines instead. So I have here an example of a catch application, a pod info application, basically, that is deployed using my CI pipeline. In this case, my GitHub Actions. I have this open here, pod info, and it can be used as an example. I basically forked this application from Stefan. Stefan created pod info as a simple application to give you some information on Kubernetes, the web APIs and get environment and others. So you as a developer, you can learn how to use it. But the way he did it is he gave you a few deployment options, and one of them is deploying this pod info application using a Helm chart. And if you look at the Helm chart that he created here as an example, it is easily accessible because he did the work for you. But if you are a developer that you're trying to deploy your different services that you're creating every day, here are the things that you would need to learn. For example, you need to do a deployment YAML. So your deployment sets from a Helm chart perspective, which is not easy to create, as you can see. Your ingress rules, your services that you would have to create, service account, and others to be able to deploy your application from your CI pipeline. But now I forked that same application, and I'm going to try to get that application deployed on Kubernetes, but now using Ketch. What I did is I cleaned up a lot of it because I don't need the Helm charts. I don't need customize. I don't need any of these things to have my application deployed. What I created was I'm going to use GitHub Actions. So I created a workflow on my GitHub Actions, which does pretty much, it sets which cluster I want to deploy my application to using some environment variables. It builds the image for me based on the code that I have on GitHub. It checks out the code. It builds the image for me. It hosts my image on Google Container Registry, publishes the image there. And as a last step, what it is actually doing, it's setting up Ketch. And in this case, it's installing the Ketch CLI. And for me, it actually, what it does is it basically creates the pool. It adds a pool for me. It creates an application, and it deploys the application. So basically, the same steps that I performed before from my CLI, it's actually performed from my GitHub Actions. I already have that application created here, but if you see, basically GitHub Actions performs all these all these tasks and deploys my application directly inside my Ketch instance. So now your CI pipeline, it is much simpler and cleaner. From a developer perspective, I'm focused a lot more on my application code delivery itself. And when I go to Ketch, I have the same thing here. I have my pod info that was deployed by GitHub Actions, and I can access my application directly from here. And I can see it is working. And if I go back to some of the pod info information, for example, if I want to get version, I can see the same thing here. So now my deployment is a lot easier. It's tied to my CI pipeline, and me as a developer, I'm focused on my application code instead. And if I go back, one of the things I did is I added a CNAME to my application called podinfo.thecatch.io. If I try accessing that as well, it works just the same. And if I were to do it as a developer using Helm or using Kubernetes, I would need to learn how to deal with my ingress with Istio, how to generate the certificates and so on. In my case, if I'm doing it using Ketch, I can do a Ketch CNAME add, for example, and I pass the CNAME that I want to add to the application and the name of my application, in this case, podinfo. So what Ketch is going to do is Ketch is going to generate the certificate for you, create the entry point in your ingress, and attach the certificate to that endpoint, so it is available to you. You can do that the same way directly from here, from your CLI, but you can also do that from your CI pipeline. So the whole delivery process from beginning to end, it's exactly the same, and it's all lined up. From a Ketch perspective, you have more control of your applications, such as from an application perspective, you can create, deploy, get info on your applications, see everything that your developers are deploying, start and stopping the apps. But one of the things you can also do is actually tell Ketch or use Ketch to automatically generate your Helm charts for you. Let's say I deploy my application using Ketch, but now I need to customize parts of my deployment, right? There are things that I need to do that I need to leverage Helm for something specific. So I can do a Ketch app export, for example. Let me just clean this up a little bit. And I can say the app name and the directory. So I can say app export. I would say podinfo. And my directory is going to be, let me see what I have here, actually. I'll create a directory called charts. Okay. And I'm going to do Ketch app export podinfo and then apps. It exported my application. If I go into my apps, I can see my podinfo application here. And I can see all the information that I need to be able to deploy my application. To deploy my application directly from here. Other than that, you also have the different controls over your applications, such as your setting environment variables, scaling units up and down. So now you don't need to understand how to do that directly from Kubernetes, how to manage your pods and how do you inject environment variables into your pods using Kubernetes. So at the end of the day, Ketch's goal is to facilitate the deployment directly from your CI pipeline and allow the developer to focus primarily on the application code rather than on Kubernetes infrastructure. The last but not least is where you can get more information related to Ketch. So Ketch is available as an open source under Apache 2 license, and you can find it under github.com/shipa-corp/Ketch. We encourage everyone possible to try and open up issues, open up ideas, or fork the project and really help us build Ketch and address the requirements specific to your applications and help us grow Ketch. We are working on new versions of Ketch where we're now going to have also Canary deployments available, application logs available directly from Ketch. So all again to facilitate the developer's life when deploying application. But we again encourage you to be able to test Ketch and work with us. And if you are looking for documentation, you can go directly to learn.thecatch.io. There you can find detailed documentation on managing CNAMEs, your application, your pools, getting your applications deployed, as well as directly from our website, thecatch.io. You can find under the blog session, which we post a lot of content on how to integrate Ketch into GitHub Actions, for example, how to have my different applications deployed, and more. So I think that's it. I hope that was insightful and provided some information on Ketch, what the project is about, and how it can help you get your applications delivered across Kubernetes clusters.
Great. Thank you so much, Bruno. Do we have some time for Q&A?
Yep.
Okay. So folks, if you want to either raise your hand or enter the questions into the Q&A section, we can start getting those questions answered for you. Okay, if we don't have any questions from our attendees, then we will wrap up. Anything else, Bruno, you'd like to add? Oh,
No,
we've got one. Where do I get Ketch?
you can download, you can use Ketch going directly to GitHub on sheepa/corp/Ketch. That's where you can find Ketch's source code. But if you're looking at installing Ketch, you can do that using learn.theketch.io/docs. I would say that's the best place for you to go and get more information on how to use Ketch and install it in your cluster.
Okay. What kind of community support is there for Ketch?
Yeah, that's a good point. We have actually support. Our engineering team is supporting the community directly on GitHub with issues open and ideas, but we also have a Slack channel that is available as well to answer any questions. And you can find the link to the Slack channel both in the documentation as well as in the GitHub repository.
Very cool. And since we're a pretty small group, I've also updated everybody's talking permissions, so you're welcome to come off of mute and just start talking.
Yeah, I have a question. What challenges do you see with installing and running Ketch on an on-prem Kubernetes instance?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. We don't oversee challenges as long as you're following the documentation that is available here in learn.theketch.io, and you're using one of the supported ingress controllers, which on the current version of Ketch is supported both traffic and Istio, more to be added later. As long as you have these requirements, it shouldn't be an issue on installing on your own premises Kubernetes or managed Kubernetes or K3S, for example, as well.
Okay, fair enough. How does Ketch coordinate the creation of certificates with internal tools that the company has? For example, certificate issuance tooling and things like that.
No, that's a good question. So we leverage your ingress controller. So in the case that we have here, excuse me, on the demo, when I do a catch cname add, for example, and I pass the application, what Ketch is going to do is Ketch is going to connect to Istio. In my case, I have Istio installed, as well as cluster issuer and cert manager in your cluster. So Ketch is going to leverage Istio and your cert manager attached to Istio to generate that certificate and attach. So we're going to be basically leveraging your ingress controller for that.
I see. So whatever ingress, if we've written our own ingress controller, that's you will contact Ketch will contact it as per its standard API.
That is correct. Yep.
Fair enough. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, any more questions? Well, thank you so much, Bruno, for joining us, and we can wrap up.
No, thank you for having me, and I appreciate everybody joining and the opportunity of talking a bit more about Ketch as a project here as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.